Late Night with Liz. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Minnesota Nurses Association and how they recently, as of yesterday, voted to strike. So we're going to be discussing tonight what that means. This would mean if they did strike, that 15,000 nurses in Minnesota would basically not work that day. We're going to talk about what that kind of means, why they are doing it, and it's not because they are evil trolls who hate patients, which is somehow the messaging that sometimes gets sent across. And we'll just discuss a little bit about nursing unions and all of the things. If you are here live, hello, welcome. We have Nurse Scott, of course. Let's see, Mel. We have Montanagal, LB the SRT, Boho. Welcome, everyone. See Emerson. And if you're watching on the replay, hello, Aaron. Then you can catch the timestamps and skip all of the little chatty bits in between. I'm very proud today because I was only 4 minutes late, and considering I literally just got out of a bunk bed from putting my children to sleep, happy. The way bedtime works in this house, there's no in between. You are either going to, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to put the ACE stream at 8:30, and they're either going to go to bed at 7 or at 8:27. There is no in between. There is absolutely nothing going on. Hello, Maricel. Okay, so I thought we would start off with, obviously, we have to roll the very fancy intro, and then we will dive right into the article, start dissecting it. Do let us know in the comments if you are part of a nursing union. I have been part of a nursing union. I had a really good experience. What was your experience? It doesn't have to be a nursing union because I know we're not all necessarily nursing people. I think Starbucks has unions now. All sorts of people have unions. Teachers have a lot of unions. I think one day I'm going to get Nurse Adrienne on here. She's like an expert on unions, and we will chat the nitty gritty of unions so we can all educate ourselves. But I literally thought of this topic maybe 3 hours ago. So there was no time to notify her and be like, hey, let's go. Here we are. All right, let's roll this intro and get into the deets. Night shift has more fun. I like that intro probably more than I have any need to. All right, let's see if we can share this screen. Share. Okay, we got this. Okay, so this is from, do we see it? Yes, I hope so. Not Michigan. So I was in a nursing union in Michigan, so I'm going to mistake that all that time. Okay, so I'm just warning you. They're neighbors, but are they neighbors? No, they're not even neighbors, right? There's Wisconsin in between. So I'm going to just mess it up. Please know that. Okay, so 15,000 nurses authorized to strike as they fight for fair contracts that put patients before profits. This has, as it happened yesterday, it's been causing a little of a kerfuffle. I've seen mostly positive things, but my media is super biased because I am, obviously most of my social media is honestly homesteading and yarn and like crochet. But the nurses that I do follow are obviously very pro this, pro having the union, pro having all of this going on. Let us know in the chat where you kind of fall in terms of unions. Right now, it looks like 77% of you have not had any experience being in a union. And I like Aaron's energy. Aaron says, no experience with unions, BSN student, just here for the snark and maybe to learn something. Probably mostly the snark, and I'm here for it. I appreciate you. And see, Emerson said he worked for a union in the Southwest several years ago, had a no strike clause. That's very interesting. They collected dues but could not do anything. Whether you were a union or not, you got the same pay. That is very odd. Seems to defeat the purpose. And hello, Vanessa. Welcome to the chat. Okay, so let us dive in. Let me find my thing. Okay, so I also saw there was a point to that. The ADHD is strong today, friends. I've also seen some things when I purposely went looking for it of people snarking and being like, oh, unions are the devil and this is the worst thing in the entire world. And how dare these people abandon the patients? And we are going to be leaning, there's going to be a lot of that, okay? Because the main voices against unions, which we will cover, I'll show you the organization that's primarily against unions and kind of the verbiage that a lot of them uses. We'll talk about that too. And it's very, very manipulative. Are we shocked? No, we're not shocked, because the best way to manipulate nurses is to tell us that, oh my gosh, if you don't show up to work, even though you've worked like 8 days in a row, everyone is going to be abandoned and it's your fault, which it's not, friends. It's not your fault. Set boundaries, say no to overtime. Just don't pick up the phone. Okay. All right. Moving into it. So St. Paul and Duluth, August 16th. 2022. This morning, nurses within the Minnesota Nurses Association in the Twin Cities and the Twin Ports. I should have looked up what the Twin Cities are. Minneapolis and St. Paul, maybe. Someone let me know in the chat if that's right. Responded to the overwhelming vote of members to authorize a potential strike of 15,000 nurses in their fight to fair contracts to hold healthcare executives accountable to put patients before profits. So this is the first good thing to note, is in a nursing union. So the basic way that nursing unions work, right? We're just going to go nursing union 101 in case you are not familiar of it. Basically, if you have a union, so Michigan, there we go, Michigan, Minnesota Nurses Association, your hospital, usually all the nurses in your hospital and other healthcare systems, perhaps that are adjacent, say, we're all going to get together. We are going to pay union dues to, whoever, the Minnesota Nurses Association, and they will have a representative that we elect, the nurses elect, that is paid to literally represent and bargain for you. So what that basically means is you can all collectively come together as a voice of nurses, and this person is going to come. Usually there's a couple different people that are like the liaisons between the nurses and the healthcare systems, and they take everything that you want as nurses and like find what's going to work best for the most people. So you don't necessarily get what you individually want, but like what the group wants in terms of like pay, usually paid time off, retirement benefits, things like that. They bundle them all together and they go and tell the hospital, hey, if you don't do this, we won't work. So basically it's called a collective bargaining agreement, where all of the nurses are coming together and saying, instead of there being a pay structure where we all fight individually or we all try to negotiate individually what our time off and everything like that is, we're all going to come together and as a healthcare system fight one front, you know what I mean, with these bargaining. So that is what kind of basically a union is. When you are in one, there's steps if you're going to strike. So striking is the big weapon that you have in a nursing union in your back pocket, right? So you can basically say, hey, every 3 or 4 years or whatever it is, in our hospital, it was a 3-year contract. The people that come and bargain for you, they fight with the hospital. I probably shouldn't say fight. They negotiate. It's a fight. Let's be honest. It's a fight. The people bargaining fight with the hospital, and they say, let's set up a contract and it'll have a pay schedule over the next 3 years, and you both agree on it, right? So the nurses usually have to give a little and the hospital has to give a little, but usually it's in the one I was in, at least, it was very beneficial. We got paid well. We knew what our salaries were going to be for the next like 3 to 6 years, because you had a certain amount of raise that you were like, it was stipulated. You knew how much PTO you were going to get based on your seniority. And so it kind of just said like, hey, for the next 3 years, this is your contract, right? So when those contracts are up, that is when the nurses can come forward and say like, hey, in this next contract, we want to negotiate for this. And if the hospital says no, then we will strike and we won't come to work. The con side of that is that if you aren't going to work, you aren't getting paid. And it's really a measure of last resort, but it's basically, that is the ability to fight back, is to say, we're going to strike, we're not going to go to work. And eventually hope that stalemate causes enough issues, which it will, because it creates an unsafe situation. I mean, that is why you don't do it to create unsafe situations for patients. You're doing it because you're saying, in this situation, like things are so unsafe, and the only way literally to make you listen is for us to not come to work, because otherwise you won't listen to us. So it is a measure of last resort. And so that is what we're talking about when we're talking about strikes. Hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I just, I may not be able to answer them, but from my experience, that's what it was. So before you strike, because striking is the last possible thing, usually the hospital and the union are in negotiations, right? So they're fighting it out for a while, and the hospital will present something, and then the union will come back and say, like, no, but here's our compromise. And then they'll go back and forth and back and forth for a while, months usually. In the case of Minnesota, they have been going back and forth for 5 months, which is quite a long time. And then if the union finally feels like there is nothing happening here, no one is budging, they will put it up for a vote and say, hey, nurses, do you want to strike? Like, are you willing to strike over this? Or should we just accept basically the contracts that the hospital is offering? And all the nurses that are then at that health system or part of that union that's affected will then go and vote. And they are not voting to say, yes, let's go on strike tomorrow. They're saying, yes, I agree that I think we should strike if no agreement that is reasonable is met. And basically, if they agree to strike, then they're saying, like, yes, I won't come to work. I won't get paid. But I think this is worth it. When that happens, it's not like they're going on strike tomorrow. So I think it's really good. All of this to say, I think it's really good that they said to, in this article, the Twin Ports responded to an overwhelming vote to authorize a potential strike. I've seen a lot in the media where it's being reported as like, this is a definite thing that is happening. And it's not. It's not a definite thing that 15,000 nurses in Minnesota are not going to come to work. They authorized the strike. It is now up to the liaisons, the nursing leaders and people in charge of this nursing union to say, okay, we're going to strike. And they set the dates. They kind of come together and they say, this is when we're actually going to do this. And they tell the hospital or healthcare systems 10 days in advance. Okay. That's what at least this one's agreed to. So that's why it's interesting that, before we had someone and said that where was it? C. Emerson, what's your real name? What's your first name? I feel like I should know it at this point, that they didn't have striking power because then there's literally no point because you don't get anything, right? There's literally no Chad. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. Because then there's no point, right? You have nothing in your back pocket. So basically where we are now with the Minnesota Nursing Association is the nurses all voted, and it was an overwhelming response to say, yes, let's vote. And it had to be, I think, like, it didn't give a number. It just said it had to be a huge majority of nurses that said, yes, I want to strike. So now the ball is kind of in like the nursing court. Usually what happens here is then the hospital's like, well, crap. And the hospital usually at this point comes together and says, okay, like they're really serious about this because they don't want you to strike, right? Because that's very unsafe. You have to pull in a bunch of nurses that are going to be like travel nurses to come and pull people in. Usually there's all sorts of managers running. It's an unsafe situation for patients. And that is what the media will usually highlight is like, oh, these nurses are abandoning their patients, yada, yada, yada. When the reality is the nurses are doing this because and we'll read through what they would like. The working conditions are so unsafe, but they never talk about that, right? It just they don't talk about that. So that is where we're currently sitting. Now it is up to the nursing leaders. Hopefully they'll be able to work something out with the hospital. In my experience, I have voted yes to strike before at my nursing union, but then the hospital like pooped themselves and decided that they were going to give in to the nurses' demands, as they said. And they were like, okay, we don't want you to strike. And then they all were like, oh my gosh, but this is going to be the end of the world. Like the hospital is literally going to fall apart because now we have to like pay you more and give you better. I think we were fighting about like just our regularly scheduled pay raises, and then which we were paid well. And the biggest thing that we fought about in this contract that they were going to strike over was like parking, because you used to have to park like miles away, and like benefits. So that's what the big one was for ours, and safe ratios. They were trying to increase the ratios, and the hospital was like telling people, they're like, this is going to absolutely destroy the hospital. But guess what? They did it, and the nurses got their way. And did the hospital fall apart? No, it made more money than ever. So moral of the story. So anyway, that is kind of that's where we are. Okay. So they have voted yes. let's go. Did that make sense? Someone let me know if that made sense. Or if you have any questions. And let me see. And we'll get into like other nitty gritties of situations here. Oh, good. Second Opinion has highlighted some things. Before we keep going with the article, maybe we'll read a few of them. Jan Kelsey said, I've been part of a union in the past. My experience was mostly positive. I'm very pro RN and generally healthcare workers being unionized. Me too. So that's my bias going into this is I've had a great experience at a union. It helped me make a lot more money, get a lot better benefits. I think that hospitals don't listen to nurses unless they are unionized because you have no general, it's everyone fighting for themselves instead of fighting together for like the overall advancement, right? Because if you're not in a unionized hospital, you're trying to negotiate your own pay, you're trying to negotiate your own PTO. And what about the nurses that like aren't as good at that? Or why can't we all like, it's absurd to me that nurses would be paid differently. But that's because my experience has been in union hospitals. I'm like, what do you mean you have to like bargain for your your income? Like it's just, if you've been a nurse this long, this is how much you make. And there are cons to unions, and we will go over those in a little bit if I ever get through this article. Montana Gal. I think I butchered that in the beginning, so I apologize. Happening at my hospital too. Recently rolled out new staffing grid. That's kind of like how a staffing grid is how many nurses are assigned to how many patients, how many units, kind of type of thing. Unsafe nurse and patient ratios, very stressful. They cut nurses' hours, then fire because violation of attendance policy. Well, that is some crap. And that is some things that unions can come in and say. You know, they can say, like our union was able to, they gave us nurse patient ratios that were safe. And in case you are unfamiliar, nurse patient ratios are literally saving lives because they say, hey, this situation, you have to have a certain number of nurses for a certain number of patients, and then you're less overwhelmed and you can take better care of people. And they also could say in like times of low census, like, oh, you have to let the employees work and then let go of the per diem, or, that can all be bargained for as well, kind of in terms of an attendance thing. Let me see. Jennifer Claire says, I work in the travel industry. I'm part of a union and they fought for a few things on my behalf. Very thankful for that. I understand everyone is not as fortunate. Yeah. And there are definitely nursing unions, like the one that Chad's in, that do nothing, that like literally just collect your dues and do absolutely nothing. Nurse Scott says, a lot of people, I'm sure, look sideways at nurses going on strike. It can seem like we're just leaving patients with no nurses. Stay tuned. I'm sure we'll discuss how that's not true. Indeed. Thank you, Scott. Good spoilers. Teresa Madison, applying to work this strike, $120 an hour. Trust me, at admin, paying that wage increases the striker's ability to get the nurse's terms. And this is something that we can talk in a moment, because this is the term for people who come and cover strikes are scabs. And there is, as Teresa, I'm sure knows, I mean, $120 is pretty bank, but people who come and cover the strike are not looked at positively, typically, because they're like, they want the hospital to hurt, and this is kind of helping. But in reality, I mean, you're still not someone who normally works at the hospital. So this is still, it's going to make the hospital bleed. They're obviously bleeding a lot of money doing this, and the point is getting across. So I think it's kind of ridiculous personally when people get annoyed at get annoyed at people who come in and work as to cover the shifts of people in a strike, because like someone needs to take care of the patients, bottom line, and it's never going to be as safe and as good as if it's the nurses that already work there. So I think the point is made. I'm not against nurses coming in and covering and making bank off of this situation. You can respectfully let us know your comments down below if you don't agree. We always welcome dissent, as long as it is, it doesn't have to be polite. It can just be, not really mean. There's a better word for that. Respectful. So that's an interesting thing there. And yeah. All right. So let's dive into this a little bit before I get too lost in the weeds, and then we'll come back to some comments. Okay. So why are they striking? So almost every time that a nurse is striking, or a nursing union hospital is striking, is because they feel like the hospital is prioritizing money over patients over profits, patients before profits, I think is the slogan for this one, but patients over That's like usually the general thing that, and like Scott said, that everyone's going to paint it as like, oh, nurses just want more money. When in almost every situation, yes, there is a negotiation for like, hey, I would like a salary increase, but that's usually one of the many things that nurses are asking for in these contract negotiations. Usually they're also asking for safe and secured staffing ratios because we do not have that on a state level, except for California, who says, hey, med surge, 4 nurses to 1 or 5 nurses to 1, ICU, 2 nurses to 1. So then the hospitals are just in charge of setting these ratios. And one thing you can negotiate in a union is your patient ratios and, or your like retirement, your paid time off, your how are you going to negotiate holidays, and all of that is something that's in there. And usually, like a lot of those things benefit patients, right? We want to have safer patient ratios. We want to just make things a safer work environment, but the media never shows that. The media usually is out here, the people who are really anti-union are going to point it at all of these nurses are abandoning their patients and really trying to play the guilt card. And it's really hard. Like I remember when we voted to strike, there were a lot of people that were then like picketing and just being really, really mean, standing outside the hospital, like saying really horrible things about like the fact that all the nurses chose to strike because they were like, I can't believe you're like abandoning my dad and all of that stuff. So that is another reason why I wanted to have this stream, was just to show support for the Minnesota nurses who voted for this, because they're getting probably a ton of crap from people who are very anti-union. So I'm all for supporting them. Yay, Minnesota nurses. If any of you are Minnesota nurses and you voted for this, go you. Let me know in the chat. We'll give you a shout out. Hospital executives so this is why Minnesota was doing it. Hospital executive with $1 million salaries have created a crisis of retention and care in our healthcare systems. Does this sound familiar? It's almost like every single other hospital is doing the same thing in our poor for-profit healthcare system. Because even when hospitals are nonprofit, somehow the CEOs still make millions of dollars. Interesting how that works. We will talk about that in a future video, how nonprofits actually work as healthcare systems, as more nurses are leaving the bedside, putting quality patient care at risk. And nurses do not take this decision lightly, but we are determined to take a stand at the bargaining table, on the sidewalk, if necessary, to put patients before profits in our hospital. And usually when you are on strike, all the nurses will stand outside with signs saying like, hey, this is why we're on strike. We want profit, like patients over profits. And it looks bad for the hospital. So not only are things on the inside of the hospital not going well because, all of your nurses that normally take care of your patients left, also on the outside, it looks really crappy when all of your nurses are standing outside on the sidewalk being like, this hospital is corrupt AF, and why is the CEO making $3 million? And why do I have 8 patients, right? It just looks really bad. And since patients get to choose most of the time, healthcare is a, business after all, which they just love when it's pouring money into their pockets, but they don't love it when things like this happen. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, when I go get my, elective, random surgery, I am not going to go to that hospital because they had that strike and they must not be nice to their nurses and make things safe. So another thing to consider. Right now in Minnesota, nurses are overworked, hospitals are understaffed, and patients are overcharged. While hospital CEOs with multi-million-dollar salaries have refused to negotiate with nurses over solutions of the crisis of short staffing, retention, and patient care. The problems are getting worse. Recent studies show more nurses are planning to leave the bedside, while adverse events for patients are increasing. So things are getting more unsafe for patients. I think now, 33% of nurses will leave the bedside within the first 2 years. And we saw in that last stream where we were talking about is there a nursing shortage? Short answer, no. There's just a shortage of healthcare systems willing to be decent. I'll leave that one, second opinion. Can you leave that link down below and it's there if you want to watch it after this one. We learned that almost all hospitals have a 5-year turnover. So within 5 years, every unit will have lost all of its nurses, because that's about how long people last. So that's horrifying. So clearly there's a problem here. Corporate healthcare policies in our hospitals have left nurses understaffed and overworked, while patients are overcharged. Did we already read that? No, it just sounds the same as the sentence before. Nurses have one priority in our hospitals: to take care of our patients, and we're determined to fight for fair contracts so nurses can stay at the bedside to provide quality care for our patients. Because if you have vacation time that you can use, because just because you're given vacation time doesn't mean you can use it. Okay. A lot of the hospitals, you go to request the time off and they say, no, we don't have enough nurses to cover you. So that's crappy. Also, unions can help with that. Like, you can't just deny everyone their vacation time, people. So if we create an environment where nurses have safe ratios and they can take vacation and they're getting paid in regards to like inflation and prices, right? Because prices are going up in healthcare, but interestingly, prices are going like burp, and nursing pay is going like meh, right? So why don't we pay people in accordance to what we're making, and maybe they'll stay. What a concept. Nurses voted overwhelmingly to authorize the strike. That was yesterday, which required a supermajority. That was the word. I was like, what is a supermajority? But I like that. So good job, Minnesota nurses, for coming out as a supermajority to pass the vote. The votes authorized nurse negotiation leaders to call a strike following a 10-day notice to hospital employers. So they first have to pick a day, like they have to actually call it. I'm guessing after this, they're all going to go back to the bargaining table and say like, hey, we have voted yes to strike. So here's your chance. Like, give us your best and final offer. Kind of like you're buying a house, right? Like, give us your best and final. And if we hate it, then we'll give you a 10-day notice and we're going to strike. Such a strike of 15,000 nurses would be one of the largest nursing strikes in U.S. history, and would be the first time the Twin Cities and the Twin Port nurses took such an action together in contract negotiations. So basically, sometimes it's just one hospital striking or one healthcare system striking, and this one is 7, I think, healthcare systems. It's 15 hospitals, and let me find my notes. 15 hospitals and 7 healthcare systems that would be affected. So they have all joined together in a mega pack. So this is pretty hardcore. And they're trying to negotiate. So here is the hospitals, and they're saying, it's interesting that you don't want to pay us more and that you are so focused on all of these. When let's look at how much money these CEOs are making. Okay. So we have CEO James Hereford makes $3.5 million a year. So that's 40 times more than a nurse. So that's a lot. Essential Health CEO David Herman makes 2.69. Health Partners CEO Andrea Walsh, 2.4. All the way down, we have here at the low end, poor Eric Lawn and Nicholas Van Deleen make $700,000 plus. I don't know what the plus means, and there's 2 of them. So really it's 140 or 1.4 million together, because apparently they're co-CEOs. Interesting. How does that work? Since negotiations began in March, nurses have pressed hospital executives at the bargaining table and in the public over the need to negotiate with nurses to solve the short staffing crisis, retention, and care in our hospitals. Nurses have held informational pickets at 15 hospitals. So that's when you go outside and you basically try to raise awareness while you're in hostage negotiations here, right? So they've been fighting for 5 months to try to get a contract. So they don't have one right now, actually. Like, things are just up in the air. They've been trying to get it. And so one of the things is they're like, fine, we'll go out inside and try to raise that awareness piece without the strike. So like, to try to shame you into all of this and make the public aware. So maybe they pick a different place. They did it. I'm sure it raised some awareness, but the hospital was like, that's not enough to make me worried. So now they're working since May 31st without any contract for those nurses that are in the Twin Cities, and in the Twin Ports, theirs expired in June. So while nurses seek solutions to short staffing and retention, hospital executives have insisted on focusing on wages. So this is interesting. And this is kind of comes back to they're focusing on the money, right? So the nurses are saying, hey, we would like a pay increase. We want safer patient ratios. We want this and this and this and this, kind of the whole package. And the hospital, who also with the same breath says, this will financially destroy us. They say that somewhere later where they're like, well, we can't do it because then I would be able to get $3 million, $3.5 million as my salary. And that would make me sad, and I would have to sell one of my yachts, and I don't want to do it. So interestingly, that same hospital that's so paranoid about having to do that, they're also like, hey, I don't really want to reduce the nursing ratios, and please don't talk to me about time off, but do you want more money? And the nurses are like, no, we actually want all of that. Like, those other things are just as important, but they're unwilling to budge on anything. They're like, let's just give you the money and leave. And the nurses are like, no. So now they're fighting over the fact that they want the money, and everyone else is like, no, we actually want the full package. So this is all coming after, and then it goes on to talk about basically you might hear something about that they had a huge vote of no confidence. Basically what that is when the people in your institution, I've actually had that happen at my college before. When I went to Michigan State, they I don't know, the deans of the school voted no confidence in I don't know who runs the mega dean, the president of the school. So basically everyone comes together and says, I don't think you can actually do your job. So that doesn't look good either. I don't know how it ties in. That seems really embarrassing. So I thought I would throw it in there because we're throwing some shade. So don't really know what the implication of that is, other than that's mega embarrassing if your whole healthcare system says I have no confidence. Ooh, that's a bad look. So Minnesota hospital CEOs have refused to address these issues in negotiation with nurses, leading nurses to take Monday's vote to authorize a strike of 15,000 nurses. Nurses in the Twin Cities have been working out a contract, and then it expires and blah, blah, blah. It also goes over, this is nice. Despite the fact that the hospital executives continue to earn significant raises on their $1 million salaries, such as James Hereford, who took a 90% raise. So 90 is a lot, bringing his salary over $3.5 million. These same CEOs are offering nursing average annual increases of only 4%, well below the current rate of inflation and the climbing cost of living. Hospital CEOs with the $1 million salaries can afford to put patients before profits and to do right by Minnesota nurses. So that is the Minnesota Nurses Association take on the whole deal in general. So that is where we are. Let me try to find where we are in terms of the chat. I've lost myself. There's 163 of you here. That's exciting. If you are liking the chat, please do compressions on the like sign an odd number of times, and it will save the video's life. It will tell YouTube that you like this and you want to send it out in, the rest of the YouTubes. Yeah, 90%. No, momenters, 90%. One of Church of POS says one of our execs referred to us as cheeks in the seats. Lack of respect is horrible. So they don't basically care how long they retain nurses, anything like that. They just need a cheek in the seats, right? They just need a nurse to fill that spot. Nurse Scott, please do change your major to hospital admin, but just get paid the same. So be the change. Okay, Scott, be the one who's actually, I am going to be here and just kind of, I'm the example. I want to fix this and not be paid a butt ton of money. Okay. Unless you want to share it with me, in which case that's totally fine. Halfsies. Okay. Great. Since I inspired the change. CBT nut. So I like how my hospital tried to get me to sign a 2-year contract for a $7,000 bonus. I'm also a paramedic on the side and was offered a $20,000 sign-on bonus in private EMS. That seems a bit fishy at best. Sign-on bonuses are pretty sketchy. Okay. Sign-on bonuses are sketchy. Let's see. Sorry guys, I'm trying to find Roderica. I'm in Delaware. Hospital powers at B are talking about raising ratios across the board, and we are already in dire straits as far as staffing. I wish we could strike. Organize. So you can, I have no idea how to set up a union, but you can get involved. You can set one up. The nurse Erica and she and Scrubs, I will leave their Instagrams and their TikToks linked down below. Erica and Sarah are awesome at this type of thing, and they know a lot more than I do. And we'll get Adrienne on here, and Adrienne will teach us. She's been on the panels before. She will teach us how to organize a union. Okay. We will do it. Osmond S. says, accusations of abandoning patients is a great reason why strikes by nurses should be broadened to other sections of workers. Imagine if auto workers, dock workers, railroad, etc., stuck in support of struck in support of nurses. That's what I'm talking about. I'm like, everyone is just done. None of us are going in. And like, we could all stand up for each other and fight the crazy corporations that are making a butt ton of money and not sharing any of it. Rude. It's definitely not just about money from Francesca. It's about behavioral health nurse with 25 patients to one nurse, inadequate PPE, no lunch break, to name a few concerns. Yes, 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 indeed. Lauren Kelly says, it's kind of ironic that nurses on strike are misjudged for abandoning their patients when the purpose of the strike is to make the hospitals and patients safer. It is interesting, isn't it? Aaron said, yes, patients can choose, but what about patients whose insurance dictates which hospitals they can go to? Oh, for sure. But that's not really what the hospital is worried about. I'm talking more about like some people, your insurance tells you where you have to go. Like mine does. It says, hey, this is the hospital that if something happens to you, you better get your butt over to. Even if you are somewhere else, we're going to fight you and tell you it wasn't enough of an emergency. Like if I was somewhere else and had to go to the emergency department, they'd be like, I think you could have driven the 2 hours to your other hospital that we would prefer you to go to. So this is more for people who have the fanciest of the insurances and they get to pick where they go. That's who they're catering to in terms of the hospital trying to look good, right? Crystal F says, instead of the public taking out their anger on nurses, redirect that anger towards the hospitals and question why the nurses felt they had to get to that point. I wish I had a union. We will get you in union. Nurse Scott says, nurses outside equals problems inside. This is something that we will see a whole lot. And yes. Surgery Studio. I'm originally from Michigan. When I moved to Texas and went through orientation at Baylor, a very last video they made, everyone watches how you better not even think about bringing a union in. Yes. So there is a lot of, we can transition into that. Perfect. And when you are in a union or in a hospital that doesn't have a union, hospitals, it might not shock you that hospitals don't like unions, right? Because hospitals want to make a lot of money. And when you have a united front of everyone working together for the better good, you are going to have a strong nursing presentation. They're going to usually get paid more if you have a good union. If you don't have a good union, this doesn't really count. But let's say you have a really good union. And so your nurses are going to get paid more. You're going to have a safer nurse to patient ratio, which means you're going to have more nurses that they're going to pay because nurses are an expense, right? So physicians, people that provide services, nurse practitioners, PAs, they make money for the hospital, right? And nurses we are on the expense line if we're balancing the budget here because we cost money. Technically, we could all argue, and I think there is lots of data to back it up, that safer nurse and patient ratios actually saves the hospital in the long run, but hospital CEOs don't care about the long run. They care about the short run, right? So hospitals don't like unions. When all the friends get together and they say, hey, this is crappy in my end of the woods, and the other people are like, well, that's actually crappy in my end of the woods too. So maybe we can all get together and ask for something and then like have this striking weapon in our back pocket. And so they will say, that sounds like absolutely awful. We hate unions. And you also might have been told a lot of anti-union things in your, in your hospital or wherever job you are. And so hospitals hate unions and they will often come in and lie and say that unions are going to be the absolute death of everything. And again, this is in places that I'm talking about like good unions, right? Some unions are absolutely worthless, like the one that Chad is in. Like that sounds like it can't do anything. But if you are in a good union from where people are really involved and there is a strong representation and like people are very like proactive. Montana Gal, I wonder why some unions are better. It's usually who was involved in helping to write the laws of it. So like with Chad's, if you aren't allowed to strike, there's literally no point because that's the weapon that you are holding, your one and only, well, not your one and only, but one of your best ones. And the rest of it is like how involved the nurses are. How involved were people with voicing their concerns with, do you have a negotiator that is usually a nurse that comes from that area in like the state who is willing to fight for you? Are you going to the meetings? Like, do you have an active nursing community that is really, really fighting and is vocal and is communicating the concerns? A lot of it seems to be involvement and willingness to kind of like, coordinate the group of people versus people if your leadership in them isn't great, and then it can kind of go the other way. And a lot of that is dictated by who are you voting for, because you vote for the nursing leader. So it's kind of like involvement slash who you have and knowing enough. You have to get involved to know, oh, this person is actually a really terrible liaison. So it's kind of like involvement. And going forward. Nursing student Carrie, thanks for being a channel member. If you too want to have a fancy icon next to your name of your code status, you can be a channel member and hear my random rambles. We did one on the nurse with the car accident recently. So if you are a member, go check that out. Walgreens had to close a bunch of pharmacies and pay high fines over bad working conditions. Well, good. Treat people like humans. Melody Nolan. Hello, sweet Melody. And we had a live with Melody on Saturday. So if you haven't watched that on chronic care, it's a really good one. She went over a lot of stuff that like patients, chronic care, like things she wishes people knew about chronic care management. I learned a lot. I think you will too. Said there was a lawsuit over here where one network offered all the nurses in a certain department to another network. Like they hired one and they gave them better pay, just pay nurses what they're worth. And that won't happen. Yeah, that's not a good look. 'Cause then they're going to see each other and they're going to fight. And yeah, definitely not good. Mel said they had to laugh when our orientation email said they'd provide pizza and water for lunch. Is that part of the schooling? That sounds pretty typical. So we were going to talk about union busting. So a lot of hospitals will scare you, like that Baylor situation where they will make it sound like, and you don't know a lot about unions, right? We don't learn about unions in school unless you do. Maybe you do. I don't know. I never learned about them in school. Let me see. And 80% of you, let me see if I'll end this poll. End poll. 80% of you had never been in a union at your job. So that's a lot of people. So a lot of people haven't been in unions. They don't know about them. So when someone comes in and they say, this is the actual devil, joining these things is going to tank your career. You won't have a job. It's going to be a hot mess. You usually believe them, right? So one of the biggest things that let's just look and see what the other side is saying, right? So we have the National Right to Work Foundation and the National Right to Work Committee. They're like, not the same, which is confusing, and I don't totally understand it, to be totally honest. But they are, one is like, I don't even know, but we'll see. I think it describes it on one of the websites. But this is who, if you ever have people coming to you, it might be the National Right to Work Committee. So always check that out. If you ever see anything from the National Right to Work Committee, they're super anti-union. They're the ones that come in and try to scare the crap out of you. They'll partner with hospitals to come in and do in-services, saying that, they go after like every type of union, not just hospitals, to say that these are like the death of everything. They state that they are trying to, that they're a right to work. So like you can't strike, like if you strike, right, you can't go to work. That's part of the whole union thing, is you are agreeing by being part of the union that like if your union decides to strike, that you won't go to work. And so this is coming at the angle of like, well, if your place strikes, you can't go to work and you're going to lose those wages, which is like fair. And you don't have to join the union in most hospital unions. I know in some places, like with teacher unions, you like have to join the union or something, but in the healthcare system I was in, you didn't have to join the union. You just wouldn't be a bargain for employee, but you usually got the same benefits, to be honest. But then you could go to work. I mean, your coworkers would hate you, but you technically could. So they'll come in and they say you are a right to work. That's what we're fighting for. So that's their stance when they are coming in. The National Right to Work Committee is a coalition of 2.8 million workers and concerned Americans fighting to break the chains of forced unionism. So they make it sound very dramatic. And I'm sure it depends on your history with unions, to be totally fair. If you were someone like Chad and your union was terrible and you couldn't even strike, yeah, you'd probably, if you went to a different job and they were like, hey, we have a union, please join it. Pretty much everyone does. You might be like, WTF, I don't want to be in a union. This sounds absolutely terrible. So I understand. I'm not saying like, this is again, my bias of being like, I was in a good union. But just so you know, National Right to Work Committee, if you ever see that, or there's an in-service from these people, or there's a pamphlet that you're handed, it's usually because the hospital went to them and said, can you come here and scare my people? I think they're going to unionize, and that's going to cost me a lot of money, and I will lose one of my yachts. Please come. And they do. 8 out of 10 Americans believe it is wrong to force people to pay dues just to keep a job. Yeah, that does seem fair, but you don't have to be in the union in some cases. I mean, in most jobs, some might make you, so don't come at me if yours does. But I would say in most cases, unions are probably helpful, and these people are kind of just tied to yikes. So they'll send you these questionnaires. They'll do all these different things. They're trying to pass legislations. I will leave this link down below, and you can look all throughout it. It used a bunch of it got me all ruffled and annoyed earlier when I was looking at it because they were using such like fear tactics. Let's see if we can, instead of like quoting actual helpful things, it was just, so this is like the sister organization, National Right to Work Legal Defense. So I think this is the one that comes and will like fight for you. Like if you can ask them to come in if you get something about sued. Something. So obviously I know a lot about this, but mostly the point was this is the National Right to Work Foundation. If you see these words, just know that there's a little bit of a bias happening there. And that might be what we have going on. Lee Claire says, I just wish unions were not so political, just like the ANA. I don't want someone else saying they represent my beliefs when they don't know what they are. True. And part of being in a collective bargaining agreement is basically saying, and we can go over the pros and cons of unions next. Part of it is saying like, here's what I would like, but knowing that your individual voice might not be like, if the majority wants something else, the majority will probably get what it wants, right? Because you're going in and you're collectively bargaining. But I agree, I wish it wasn't so political. I'm not surprised that it is. You know, we have people who are typically like fiscally more conservative are going to be much more in favor typically of something that's like super capitalistic and allowed to kind of do its thing. Someone who is much more fiscally liberal is usually going to be like, hey, let's try to do a little bit more of what is maybe going to be better for like the collective. So I see how it becomes political, but I agree. I think it's, and if you look at, I was trying to figure out earlier, I saw someone was saying that, I think it was Nurse Erica was saying that the people who are in the anti-union, that thing we just looked at, are like hugely paid out, like, and tied to, you know, big healthcare big healthcare systems. They're getting all sorts of like money from campaigns, and like that's very much tied into a political thing of typically conservative represent like all the people. I don't know, like it's so corrupt how all of them share money, but that's kind of the other side. And Plum's mom says, I agree. Lee Claire, I don't want anyone negotiating my pay. I have gone to employers and said I'm moving on. Employers ask why. I say pay, and they match my increase by 10% of my offer. Yes. And so that's some things that some people like. It kind of depends. It goes back to like, what kind of union do you have? Because in some cases you can get even more if you go with the nursing union. And I would argue in most cases, not argue, but like in most cases, you do get paid more. Mama Nurse, I might have missed this, but on average, are union nurses paid more? Yes. If you're in a good nursing union, then yes, you are going to be paid more. You might not get everything that you particularly wanted. Like say you might be willing to go in and negotiate and say, I will get paid more. I'll have less PTO. If you're by yourself, but if you're in a bigger thing, usually you get a little bit more of like everything equalized, right? To benefit what most nurses at the institution want. And I would say, Plum's mom, I'm glad you have had positive experiences, but I think most people probably haven't had that. But this is kind of the thing, right? Because people who have had positive experiences advocating for themselves are going to be like, no, I'd rather just do it because I might be able to get more this way. So it kind of comes down to, are you a person that is like, I'm going to do my thing and go and get my own, or do you want to be part of a bigger collective and try to like bring everybody with you? So, and that comes down to a personal opinion thing. I would rather be part of the big, like, you know, I want to be part of the big group and see if we can all get something better versus like individually, but again, that goes down to your own. I'm curious. Let's do another. We'll do a poll. And neither one is like right. I mean, I think one is right and wrong, but like objectively, like neither one is right or wrong. And that's why we have these conversations, to see both sides. So I don't want anyone who disagrees with me to feel like you can't voice your opinion. Voice your opinion. That's literally why we have these, is to just see both sides. With my bias, I always try to just come out and say what my bias is. And you are more than welcome to politely disagree, and we can chat about it. So I'm going to do a poll in the chat. Would you join a nursing union if available? Yes or no? Ask your community. Plum's mom says, well, that solves why Minnesota nurses are striking. Our unions here in Minnesota don't pay better than non-union. My aides are union and we can't hire a soul at 15. Other pays 22. Yeah, that's a hot mess. So usually nurses in union hospitals get paid more, but again, not every time. So it's going to vary institution to institution. Down Smith said safe patient ratios are the biggest pro for nursing unions. I would agree with that. I would say my pay was not my highest priority. And my biggest benefit that I got out of being in a union, mine was safe patient ratios, that I knew, and my, what was it, like your 401k and all of that, and my time off. I had great time off. So we got paid a little bit more, but pay was never something. We wanted parking, like we wanted all of those other things. On the side of it. Michaela S. said, can you imagine if all of the nurses in the US became unionized? Can you imagine what we would accomplish? We would take over the world. And that's why the hospitals don't want that, because they're like, oh crap. If the people that actually care about patients and want to see better things happen, this would not be good for my paycheck. So we will not be doing that. We won't be doing that. Focus on Pammy, Illinois says, focus on lives, not pay first, please. And I mean, that's again, like unpopular opinion maybe, but like if you want to focus on the pay, that's totally fine, because at the end of the day, this is a job. I know I always get flack when I say that this is a job, it's not a calling. Because at the end of the day, nursing is a job. So if you want to go out and get your money and just like all you want is to go and like fight for yourself, that is absolutely your prerogative. It is your job. You go, Montana gal. Love you, nurses. Why, thanks. Thanks. Someone else was saying that I could be a CEO and get a yacht. So, Montana gal, you can come on my yacht when I get one and I'm a CEO. Chad said, I just want the equipment to do my job. Can't start an IV without an angiocath. Yes, that's exactly what happened. Well, that's yikes. So basically, yes, I just want to be able to go to work and do my job. I think that sums it up very well. Boho said, it's true. I always say I'm working for money. This isn't volunteerism. Yes. And that gets into a whole different wild thing of, I think a lot of people think nurses do this out of like the kindness of our hearts, and it can be both. You can be a nurse because you feel like really called to it, but also it's a job. It can be that. Roderica says, I want to get paid and take care of patients. Exactly. You can want both. Exactly. I got a family support too. Exactly. And I also want to see my family and go on vacation with them and not like live in the hospital. Right. Church of POS said the hospital I used to work for just ignored the ratio rules. I used to have to file an assignment by objection every night. That's exhausting. And if you, Boho said, I love my patients and I love nursing, but I want my money. This is me. Like, yeah, this is great and all. And I love like the lovey-dovey, like blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, I love my notes for my patients, but I also love my paycheck. Come get it. So totally understand. And there's no problem. Pammy in Illinois says it was a calling for me, went back to school at 45 and everything started coming together. I was a CPA and took a pay cut. And there's absolutely nothing with that wrong too. I think, like for some people, it definitely is a calling and that's totally wonderful. I've just gotten a lot of like, people get like really angry when they're like, why did you do this? I'm like, I don't know. It seemed like a good idea at the time and it was a stable job. And they're like, but like, what made you like feel you needed to do it? And like, there was no feels. We're not a lot of feels here. So let me see. Oh, we were going to go over the pros and cons. I was like, what were we about to go over? Chad, don't worry about me. I have no bills to pay. Oh, yes. Yes. No bills, not at all. I have nothing else to do. Let me see. Ashley Brown says, hey, the Minnesota nurse here. Why, hello. Oh, I follow you on something. Is it TikTok? Maybe it's TikTok. Hello. Your profile picture looks very familiar. If not, let me know where to follow you and we can link you down below. Minnesota Nurse here. Thanks so much for bringing light to this on a national level. We have an amazing union here in Minnesota. And I'm assuming you probably voted yes to overturn it, and yay, you, go you. If there's any other Minnesota nurses out there, let me know and we'll give you a little shout out. Thanks for doing the thing and making this a national thing. I'm hoping other people catch on and are like, I want to do that too. I want to be like the Minnesota nurses who are like, I'm not taking any more of this crap. And we can see change and be like Michaela said, and make a national nursing union and just overthrow the whole thing and be like, bye. I'll be the head of it. Okay. Just kidding. I would be terrible at that. Everyone would be like, you're way too angry and you need to call down. So CPT, someone tell me how I'm supposed to say this. Usually my sister will be like, how can you not read these usernames? Please send help. But if we follow evidence-based practice in medicine, that's EBP, we get slammed legally, but hospital admin doesn't follow evidence-based practice for safe staffing. Governmental agencies just sit on their head. Yes, absolutely. It's kind of like when I was a nurse, well, I still am a nurse practitioner, but at work, when I would order things in primary care and I was like, hey, I will literally get in trouble legally if I was sued and I didn't prescribe the recommended treatment. They'd be like, why didn't you do this? But if the insurance company, if I write for it and then it says, no, we don't cover that, they get away for free, right? So why do I have to do my job, but the people who make all the money don't? I don't get it. Water. Dreamer. Lee Claire says, I want safer SGOs too, but I don't think they should back political candidates. Ding, ding, ding. Why do we have to back political candidates? I kind of think nurses can't continue without someone backing us up. Grace Lott says, Catholic health nurse here from Buffalo, strike in October 21. Hardest thing I did as a nurse outside of COVID ICU. Good luck, Minnesota. I bet it's hard. I cannot imagine because you are really and I'm sure they really play up the guilt of oh my gosh, you're abandoning all your patients. This is the worst thing ever. I'm sure they play that up, friends. And so thank you for making your stand. I think the more we make these stands and the more we say we are not going to tolerate this, that is where we will see change because we've said many times, they don't really care what nurses say. They care what nursing unions say and what patients say in, what is it? Those hospital scores. That's the thing. Okay. So let's go over pros and cons of nursing unions because I know I've obviously been oh, they're great. If you have a great one, they're great. But they do have cons. They're not all sunshine and roses. Let me see. Okay. Website. Obtained. Paste. Here. Share screen. I'm just going to press Ganey. Thank you, Cassie. Yes, the press Ganeys. That's that thing when they send afterwards and they were like, how was your nurse? How quickly did she bring you beverages? Or he. How quickly did your nurse answer their call light? We don't care if your nurse's other patient was dying. Why didn't they get to your call light? That's that stupid thing that obviously I love. Obviously, I love the press Ganey and have lots of really good feelings about it and feel like that's definitely how we should rate our hospitals and how insurance should reimburse hospitals because that's how it is. If you don't get good press Ganey scores, which are literally about did you feel like your nurse was nice? And did they take care of you like you were at a 5-star hotel? If you say no, then CMS, Centers for Medicaid Services, says, fine, then we won't pay you. So it's but did you die? But did you die? We're not allowed to say that because apparently that's rude. And I do think, it's important. It also measures pain scores and other things, which are, that's good. But then we also don't say, hey, I need you to understand that your pain's never going to be at a 0. And you have to get a 9 or 10, I think, out of 10 for you to actually get paid. So it's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess. Anyway, pros and cons. Let's find the pros and cons. Share screen. Once again, I'm just going to verbally talk you through this. While we're waiting, there's 171 of you here. That's exciting. Make sure to, just do the thing. Click the like button if you are enjoying this and want to send it out to other people, which helps us make NurseTube a thing. And don't you want everyone else to hear all my opinions? Obviously, yes. Obviously. Very important. Oh, nope, not that one. And thanks for being here, everyone. I appreciate you. I look forward to Tuesdays. They're very fun. Okay, pros and cons. Hopefully it's sharing. This was a good, I thought, pros and cons list in case you're unfamiliar with nursing unions. What is a nursing union? A nursing union is a collaboration of nurses towards a common goal or purpose. So again, this goes back to if you're a person who wants to go and fight the lion all by yourself, you're not going to like this message as much or this method as much. But if you are someone who's like, actually, I want to team up and all kind of fight the lion together, even if that means I don't get the part of the lion that I love eating the most, that would be like me. I'm like, let's be a group. Unions, therefore, appeal to me. The term union is just used to describe a group coming together. There are also professional nursing unions that bring organizations together at a national level. These groups share information about legislation, politics right within the public sector. So they'll fight for different things. It sounds like professional nursing unions and nursing associations, they represent, help ensure legislation and actions made by the government affect nurses positively. So they'll go and lobby for you, it sounds like. So there we're getting involved in the government again, which is obnoxious because it doesn't. What are you really doing if you're not setting patient ratios? But whatever. No, and we'll never get that because hospitals are in the pocket of all the politicians. So it's fine. Everything's fine. The nurses, we need Scott here. Where's Scott to tell us it's going to be fine? I'm spiraling into it's not ever going to be fine. Send help. Unionized nurses can be found working in hospitals, schools, universities, nursing homes, and the public sector. Sounds like unionized nurses can be found. We need what is that guy's voice? My husband, Joe, actually does a really good, what's the guy? He's like a nature, you guys are like, you haven't described him at all. He's like an English person who goes into nature. He's like, unionized nurses can be found in the wild, working in hospitals, schools, universities, nursing homes, and the public sector. I did it really terribly. And all of you are like, I don't even care. But it's the old British dude that talks in all of the wildlife documentaries. That dude is who I was trying to be to read that because it just sounded like you can find them in the wild. Anyway, top cons of nursing unions. David, nursing student Carrie. Yes, David Attenborough. Is he Australian? Well, that was an Australian accent, apparently. Thank you. Sir David Attenborough, nurses in their natural habitat. Thank you. You're my people. I appreciate you. This I love. And I say yes, nurses in their natural habitat can be found in hospitals, schools, universities, nursing homes, and the public sector. Crying in closets and bathrooms. Fighting back against the evil healthcare systems. Okay, top cons of nursing unions. You need to pay regular dues. You do need to pay. So usually it was, I think mine was $55 a month, which for how much more we got, it was worth it for us, but it is a cost. So you have to pay your nursing dues, which kind of stinks, especially if you're in Chad's nursing union and they do nothing for you. Then I'd be pretty salty about that and I would not be happy. 2, the dues you pay will not be based on how many hours you work. So if you're part-time, you still have to pay the same nursing dues because it's flat across the board. So also sucky if you're a per diem nurse, okay? Because then you're working as you could work twice a month and you still have to pay that same amount as the people working full-time. 3, you must go on strike if the nursing union declares one. The nursing union, like you said, you don't get paid because you don't get paid if you go on strike. 4, you will not be paid in any form if you go on strike. So those tie together. 5, you may lose health coverage if you go on strike. So if you're on strike, you don't get paid. You might lose your health benefits. I think Stanford did that, didn't they? With the Stanford nurses that went on strike earlier in the summer and they said, hey, if you do this, we're taking your health insurance away. So, hospitals really are great to their employees and love them. So they mistreat them. And then when they say, hey, stop mistreating me, they're like, well, you don't get health insurance. So manipulation at its finest. 6, seniorities mean you may be passed on for a promotion. So this is something that I do know a lot of people have trouble with within a union. So a lot of times in a union healthcare setting, promotions are given instead of strictly on a merit base, they are given on seniority. So if like when I got my pediatric job, I started working at the hospital because I knew if I started, I couldn't get right into peds, but I knew if I got into med surge, since we were a unionized hospital, if I applied for a peds job and I was up against someone with less seniority than me for the position, I would get it. If I was against someone with equal seniority, then we could kind of go head to head and like then it would be merit based, but there is hiring preference for people who have been there longer, which can be very unfair. That is very true because you can get some really crappy people who get the job even though you're a better candidate. And it's not like all the time, like that was not how it was within administration. So if you were an admin at the hospital, so a nursing educator, manager, you were no longer in the union. So then you became a non-bargained for person. So this would not be for management positions or anything in administration. Those were given based more on like merits, and by merits I mean favoritism and who knew who, but I digress. But if I was going for, I wanted a job in the PACU, even if my skills were not necessarily, as long as you meet the minimum criteria and you are more senior, you will get the job. So that can be hard. That is not great. And you will have less control over what shift you work. Again, if someone with more seniority than you wants day shift or night shift, it goes in usually in terms of seniority if you are working in a union setting. So the more senior people get the choice if they want to work days or nights. So when you're new, you pretty much get the short end of the stick, and it sucks. Seniority means you will lose less, you will have less control over the hours you work. Also, this kind of comes back to usually with holiday schedules. When you're new, you're going to get the crappier like holiday shifts. So like I had to work Christmas and Thanksgiving like every year until I had been there for like 4 or 5 years when I finally was senior enough to pick a different holiday. This also could be if you want to work 36 hours, but you were hired at 32, you have to wait until a 36-hour position becomes open, and then it is offered to the most senior person first. So a lot of it is very seniority based, and that is a con of it versus being like merit based, but it's also nice because you do have that once you have seniority and you've been loyal at that healthcare institution, because it kind of builds up. Like there were a lot of nurses that stayed for a really long time because it had that seniority, right? So it kind of can go both ways, because it really benefited you once you had been there 5 years. When I hit my 5-year mark, I mean, like you got paid a bunch more. Pretty much you had like enough seniority to get the shifts and the schedules that you wanted. So then it was like bomb. But before that sucked. The care of your patients may suffer if you strike. So they kind of made this, I think, sound a little dramatic. The care of your patients may suffer, playing into the how dare you go on strike? How dare you do this? Because they're saying if a strike is called, poor care can occur. You may feel a dissent in the workplace. Another one of the cons of a nursing union is it can lead to dissent between like nurses and the administration, because the administration is not bargained for, so they're not part of that collective agreement, and you're fighting. I mean, I literally called it hostage situations because that's kind of how it felt. You could be bumped out of your position. So this is if you're getting laid off. If you are a less senior person, your job would go to the person who is more senior, and they would lay off in terms of seniority. Again, that's how most places do it anyways, I think, is based on seniority. Like if you're firing people, you usually fire the newest people first, but this is usually pretty set in stone, and still sucks. You will have to continue to work with underperforming colleagues. This one is definitely true. There were nurses that were dangerous and yikes, but working in a union, they very much stipulate what you have to do in order to get fired, and they really have to prove it. And it's really hard to get fired at a union hospital. This is absolutely true. And there were just people where you were like, good Lord, you are lazy and the worst, and they can't fire you. You know, I mean, if enough things happens, they can fire you, but it's pretty hard to fire a union employee, and your opinion may not matter. So like the person was saying earlier in the chat, I'm sorry, I forget your name, Plum. If you want to fight for yourself and you have an opinion that is not in the majority, your voice can kind of get drowned out because they're going to go with the majority of what the nurses want. So those are the cons. And let's look at some of the pros. You may receive higher wages, kind of like we talked about. You may have improved working conditions if you get better patient ratios. Your schedule may be protected in certain aspects. So kind of like once you get to that 5-year mark or wherever your seniority is, your schedule's pretty sweet. You usually have very regulated weekends and holidays. You will have job security because if you can't get fired, you have pretty good job security. You will have legal representation because they do represent you legally. And they are pretty hardcore. So nurses never really got legally charged at our hospital because the union really went to fight for you. Like as soon as anything went down that was like, oops, I made a mistake. One of the first things you did was contact the union, and they sent a representative with you to every single meeting that you went to with management. So you didn't have to go by yourself. They had like legal people there to speak for you, which was really, really nice. If you work at a union hospital, in case you didn't know that, yes, the first thing, if you ever get in trouble and you make an error and it's not good, ask for your union to send you legal representation, and they will. Your schedule may be protected in certain aspects. Oh, we did that. You will have better benefits. Yes, I had awesome 401k. I had awesome PTO that I could use. It just generally, that's one of the things they fight for. So you have that. You may have perks to your retirement. We had great retirement benefits. You will not be subjected to favoritism in the workplace. Yes, I loved this aspect of it because until you went into management and did the admin side when it was super favoritism oriented, they couldn't give you like, oh, well, you get day shift because I like you, because it was seniority based. So it really eliminated a lot of that crap. And I loved that because I did not get along well with management. I felt they were very nitpicky, and I'm like, I don't deal with that. But I could still do it. Like when I was like, hey, I need this shift, I want to do this, they couldn't say no because they hated me. They had to let me do it. There will be a process should a grievance arise with your employer. Yes. So if you have a problem with your employer, you can go to the union and they will fight for you if you have a good union. And if things are not being handled properly, you have someone to fight for you. So, for example, when we had our parking fiasco where they wanted us to park like 3 miles away and then walk in at 11 p.m. for night shift, we were like, that seems unsafe. And the union went in and fixed that right up for us. There will be a process. You may be able to access benefits outside the workplace. Yes, our nursing union gave us a ton of discounts at like in health, like I got a discount on my cell phone bill. I got cheaper tickets to like amusement parks. We had like rental cars, like weird stuff like that. Like a lot of corporate places do that where they're like, oh, you get these weird deals. Strength in numbers. I like that. Seniority will benefit you. Yes, just give it a few years and it will. And you may be able to receive free education. That was also part of our bargaining agreement, was that I got half of my grad school paid for, which was awesome. So those are some of the pros and cons that we kind of see in the space around the thing. Chad said it's a nice stroll in the dark. Yeah. And it was winter in Michigan when they came out with this rule. And it was, so Michigan's cold, very cold, a lot of snow, very dark. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It didn't go over well. Did not go over well. We had a dark, distant parking lot. We called it our land. Oh dear. But for real, that's what we were like. Are you kidding me? New York definitely has the worst union. Let me know where your union is and if it's good or bad. We can kind of get a little bit of a pulse on that here. Church of POS. I don't play well with others, especially management. Yes. Many of you probably know the story of some of my managers. My manager on my second job did not even know who I was. And I worked there for 5 years. At like 3 or 4 years in, I ran into her in the elevator and she was like, oh, like, I must have looked lost. I was probably just tired. She's like, oh, like, do you need help? Like, where are you looking for a unit? I'm like, no, I work for you. I'm going home. She was like, wait, what? Because I worked nights and weekends. So I like really tried to hide. We have the ANA is worthless, the American Nursing Association. Yes, that's not a union as far as I know, but it is absolutely union. We have no helpful nursing associations. The ANA is useless. The AN, all of them. They are all useless. And again, in the pocket of like schools and all of that, because they just want, ugh. The ANA is a particular pile of poo. A church of POS, if I can say so myself. Let me see. We pay, we got, Ashley Brown got double pay on your birthday. That's a pro. That's amazing. That wasn't even something that would like cross my mind. So if you have other, like places that you like working in as a union, or random benefits of like getting double paid on your birthday, do let us know. Jay Krieger says, I'm in Minnesota working for a non-union hospital. I don't totally understand why. So following this, yes, there you go. Go unionize your hospital. Apparently in Minnesota, you have a great union. Nurse Scott said, under our union contract, there was no merit pay. Good and weak nurses who had been there the same length and time got paid the same. Exactly. That's exactly how it was in my hospital. It did not matter. You did have flexibility in terms of what level of nurse you were. So like if you were, if you had done, you went and got certified in your specialty and you were part of all of the, what are they, like little groups, there's a better name for them, where you get together and you just like talk about how to make the unit better. If you were doing all of that and you presented a quality improvement project, you could then go to level C. A and B were the same level. Make that make sense. It's like you're either in AB, which is the exact same, or you're C, and then you get to be D, but like no one ever really got to D. But then you got paid more. So it depended on your level and how long you had worked there. Did not matter how good of a nurse you were, not even a little bit. Medic Wolf RN said, I am not a fan of seniority versus meritocracy based facilities. Susan, who's been a nurse since the Nightingale era, may not be the best candidate, while in the same breath, favoritism isn't great either. Yeah. So that's like a hard thing to balance. I think since I'm probably very much, I would never be the favorite. I'm in favor of seniority where I'm going to force myself to become in this position, but I can totally see if you're likable, that they would be here. Also, I am here and living for Scott's. Sorry, I is David Attenborough. We're going to need this to happen on your channel. Please notice how the adult stalks and eat their young. Perfect. Mama Nurse, the dues come out of your paycheck automatically. So for us, it was our first paycheck of the month. It came out and it was, I don't remember if it was pre or post tax. Definitely scary. Montana girl to lose your health insurance. Nursing student Carrie said, I'm pretty sure they cut those nurses' health insurance a month early too. Well, that's crappy. Back to David Attenborough. The senior charge nurse flaps her wings and screeches to signal her dominance over the nurses. See how they flutter away in defense to her. I could do this all day. Please do. This would be a excellent way to spend an evening. Maybe we should do that as a group live where we just comment. We could go scrolling on TikTok and then do David Attenborough voices on it. Mel is right. Scott, we need this 100% produced. Yes. Nursing student Carrie says non-union promotions aren't based on there either. They're based on office politics. Yeah. So this is where the favoritism comes in non-union hospitals. We also double pay on your birthday. Yes, we saw that. Committees. Thank you, Scott. That's the word I was looking for. TP says, finally got a live. Always great content. Why, thank you. I appreciate it. Glad you are here for a live. Medic Wolf RN said, heck, my area doesn't even pay for extras for certs like CEN and the ED, Certified Emergency Nurse, or CFRN. I don't know what that is. So yeah. Some kind of, that's where it's going to go back to like some hospitals will pay you more for that and some will not. How can we change for pre-hospital for healthcare workers at the hospital? Who else has to pay for parking at the hospital? Because we did. I paid a lot of money a year for my stupid parking, and some nurses paid like thousands of dollars for their parking if they wanted to park in the doctor's parking lot. Stupid. Oh, certified flight nurse. Yeah, I mean, do you really need to get paid more money as a certified flight nurse, or is your payment that super sweet flight suit and the instant attitude that you are blessed with when you become a flight nurse, where you walk around like you own the freaking world? Okay, because personally, that's payment enough. Okay, you are a god in that hospital if you are a flight nurse. You don't need money. You have the suit and all of the power. Okay, absolutely all the power. Shelly Olson, as a member of the MNA in Minnesota, yes, your birthday is considered a holiday. However, my employer doesn't schedule you on your birthday because of that. Well, that is very rude. And yay, Minnesota nurse. If you voted to stand up against the evils that are the healthcare giants, yay you. And if not, still yay you, because you're great. Sorry you can't work on your birthday. Hey, no. Scott said, hey, now I wanted to be a flight nurse as a student. I love flight nurses. Like, I legitimately think they are the coolest humans ever. I do not know how they do it. I would never want to be a flight nurse. That sounds terrifying, but they are brilliant. In case you don't know, flight nurses are the ones that get on the helicopter and then they go to the scene of whatever happened. They fly down or they transport super high risk people. They get to like make all the decisions while they're in the air. They're like literally saving your life. They know how to do everything. They've worked in like peds and adult ICUs and can do everything, in my opinion, and get these super sweet jumpsuits and are literally the gods of the hospital. So that was in no way, I know that sounded sarcastic, but there was nothing but respect there. Very, very impressive. Superheroes can fly, and they do. Very impressed. And they know it. At least the ones in my hospital did. Walked around like they owned the freaking place. And yes, there were a lot of nurses that they had a lot of fun in their free time, I will say. Respect life flight. Yes. Those nurses had the pick of whoever they wanted to go and hang out with after work. We'll say it that way. Little Pookie says, as a patient, I would vote for unions as my care is compromised when the nurses are short-staffed and overworked. Yes, absolutely. Nurses and staff at TCUs and TCUs. That acronym will come to me. And long-term care are the ones that could really benefit from unionization. Absolutely. So like long-term care, therapeutic rehab, all of that definitely need unions. Jamie Mauser pays $7 a day to park because I'm grandfathered in. Some nurses pay $13 and work farther. Where do you live? I feel bad for complaining. Mine was like $300 a year, maybe more. Maybe it was more. I don't remember. It came out of my paycheck every month. Yikers. Transitional care unit. Thank you. I appreciate you. Transitional care. Perfect. Yeah, so they definitely do need help. All right, let me see if there was anything else on my list of, so this is the other thing they're fighting for, just as a fun, probably should have included this earlier. Liz, why do we have an outline if we don't follow it? Because it's more fun this way. That's why. It's more fun to just fly by the seat of our pants. Do we miss some very important points? We sure do, but there's still people here. It's fine. The S is the other thing that they're trying to push through. This is something, if you live in Minnesota, you should pay attention to. Let your legislators know that they are trying to make things safer and they should vote for this. It is Keeping the Nurses at the Bedside Act. And it is basically saying like patient ratios and trying to incentivize people to stay longer, doing all the things. They are meeting all of these points within, this is what they're presenting to the hospitals in this collective bargaining agreement and that they're trying to strike over. They are highlighting these points. They want to recruit and train nursing students because they're training a lot of nursing students and they want to try to retain them. Like they're training in the state and then I guess they leave. Retain and sustain Minnesota nurses. So rather than having to rely on, just like have your people. Support mental health care for our workers. Because, all of our mental health is so happy after the pandemic. Review and release hospital safety data. So like, hey, you have to release your safety data so that it's not just us saying things. They reported, where are my notes? There were a ton of safety things that they also submitted of why they were 8,000. There were 8,000 unsafe staffing forms submitted in the last year in these institutions that are striking. So that would help address that. And just making safer staffing things. So this, if you're curious, I will leave this link down below. But this is if you're in Minnesota. This is the act that is, where is it? I think it's in the Senate. Is it? Yes. So it must have passed in the House and now it's in the Senate. And the Senate has talked about it. They introduced it and they read it. And they were so awed by it that they couldn't touch it again. And now they're probably on break because the Senate's always on a break. I feel like most legislation in general, they like show up to work 3 days a year and they're like, well, that was rough. See you next year, Bob. So it's in the Senate right now. So contact your senators, Minnesota. Contact your senators and let's see what we can get done. Okay. Let me see. Okay, perfect. Yeah. I think I hit all my points. Do we have any questions? How are we feeling? I feel very proud of the Minnesota nurses. Well done. Do you want to get mad? Because I do have one other random point that I was going to try to weave in. And we'll probably log off in 5 minutes because that's an hour and a half. And that's plenty of time. Do make sure to go check out Nurse Erica and She and Scrubs. I will leave them linked down below. They have great information that summarizes a lot of this. Where's the one that I wanted to just find that would make us mad? It really doesn't. It didn't even necessarily have anything to do with, and like, I mean, it has to do with these hospitals, but so this is one of the hospitals, Sanford Health. So they're saying they don't have any money, right? This is how this ties in. These hospitals are like, well, we can't pay you anymore and we can't have more nurses. We can't hire more nurses because we don't have any money. Interestingly, during the pandemic, Kelby Krabenhoft, that sounds like a villain last name if I ever heard one, longtime CEO of Sioux Falls-based Sanford Health, abruptly left his job November 24th, 2020, after he made a series of controversial and unscientific comments about wearing a mask during the COVID pandemic. Basically, he sent out an email that says, I'm not going to wear a mask because it would just be performative because they don't work, basically. And then they gave him $50 million to quit. So that's interesting that they don't have any money. Most of that was already in his retirement thing, to be like totally fair. But it did include a $15 million severance and then a $29.4 million retirement plan and his normal $5.1 million salary. So maybe if you say those things, you don't get severance. Maybe you just get fired, not laid off. And you don't get a salary for the last month that you don't work there because he got fired in November, right? So why are you getting paid for December, friend? Keep a few of those millions. So that was just something to make us angry. It really had no other purpose. So that was fun. All right, let us see. I think we are going to, trying to see what 5 minutes is not enough time to get properly mad. Did we do it though? Did we do it? Yes, Montana Gal. Unbelievable. 15 million. Can I take his position? Yes, Vanessa. Please do. Chad, don't feel bad for him. Trying to feel bad for him. Nope, can't. Can I take his position for a week? Yes, work for a week and then bam, done. Perfect. I want to go work for him, work as his job for a week, and then I can start my campaign and run for whatever, Pennsylvania, whatever. Yeah. And then you just get fired. Just say something stupid. Just be like, masks are a hoax. I worked for Sanford Health and we recently just got a raise after they realized so many nurses were quitting. Yay! That's good. Perfect. And he never had to work short. Exactly. He did never have to work short. Minnesota girl. Hello. Go you. Yay, Minnesota. We're happy about all people from Minnesota today. Let me see. We'll be writing my Senate reps. Thank you. Yes. Do it. Do it. Do it. And yeah, gotta love those golden parachutes. Gotta. And gotta love them. Yeah. His life is so hard. So sad he got fired. We should all be a CEO. Yes. Here. I vote for that. Jakira White. Yay, finally caught a live one. Last semester nursing student. Congratulations on being your last semester. Go you. You're going to do great. Unfortunately, we're about to end. But I'm so glad you got to catch one live. Oh, good. Michaelan TV says, I'm ready to go on strike, honestly. That's the energy I was hoping we would bring to this live. It's like by the end of it, everyone's going to go and organize into a union and we're going to take over the world. I mean, South Dakota's attorney general unalived a man and thought he could claim he thought it was a deer. South Dakota's a little funny. Oh, South Dakota. So cute. The last place, Church of POS said the last place I worked, the manager told us that we didn't like working there, then quit. About half a dozen did. That would be me. I'd be like, all right, bye. That's not true. If I had my good seniority, I just ran away to nights and weekends. Do you have any videos on the Purpose 2025 end of the MSN NP programs for DNP? No. It is I would say it's another 2015 desired for DNPs. There are so many MSN programs that pay a ton of money to get accredited because pretty much anyone can be a online NP program. Most of them offer a master's degree and they might not reach the requirements to have a DNP, and they pay so much money into the accrediting body's pockets that there is no way that they will ever require a DNP because they would lose all of that money. I think this is going to be a thing like, I mean, how long have the like ANA and all of them been saying like, oh, we're going to eliminate ADN nurses and blah, blah, blah. It's never going to happen because we need them and they are incredibly valuable. And yeah, we can't just eliminate those. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, they are not willing to give up that money. They're going to keep saying it. CRNAs are doing it because they are a much more niche. Their accreditation is much different. The programs are all in person. They are all pretty legit, but NP programs are not that. So that's what we got going for us. They're never going to give up that money, in my opinion. And you have to get more student loan debt. Exactly. The schools want to re-enroll people, so they are going to lobby hard against it because not everyone wants to go to a DNP program. So yeah, that's my opinion. Let me know if you have a different one, but we might have to let me know on a different stream because we are going to call it here, my friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Do let us know what you think of nursing unions in the comments if you're watching live or if you are watching on the replay. Yeah, it's interesting. Are you I'm all for myself type of human? Like I will go fight this bear by myself, or are you teaming up and being like, we're going to fight the bear together and perhaps we will not get our choice cut of the bear, but we will all get a piece of bear. It's a weird analogy. It's getting late. Should probably go to bed. All right, friends. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you Thursday where we have our panel discussions. They don't know it yet. Some of them are here. But we will be talking about bullying in nursing and combating that and kind of just having oh, good, Scott. Thanks. Excellent intro. What are we talking about on Thursday? Bullying. Bullying, tactics for approaching it. We're also kind of rebranding Thursdays as the Thursdays, if you didn't know, on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time, we have panel discussions where I bring in a ton of different lovely humans who come onto the channel, and we have NurseTube, and we all just share our opinions and different perspectives. And it's kind of like break room chats. So that's what we're going to kind of merge into like break room chats. That's that series where I kind of had more of like, oh, let's pretend we're sitting on a break room and we'll have those. So that's what we're going to be kind of merging those into. We're going to be talking about bullying. It should be pretty good. I actually need to, reminds me, send out an email to all the people who are usually on those. And yeah. So Chad, if you're here on Thursday, you should be getting an email. And I imagine bullying might be intense depending on, yeah, especially if you're like the only dude. Could go both ways. Usually the dudes in our units were pretty chill and were like, they brought the drama down, but who knows? So that's what we'll be doing on Thursday. I will hopefully see some of you there. And Saturday we're doing a video. I have one coming out on monkeypox, and I'm just crossing all my fingers and toes that the information is not already super outdated. So hopefully it's fine. Thanks so much for being here today, friends. Remember that you are, I just got distracted. Mama Marissa, can you do more diaper videos? I probably won't do any more, maybe because I used to do cloth diaper videos. But I don't know if I have any more coming. Mine are almost out of diapers. So, and Chris, thanks for becoming a new member. I appreciate you. Good luck with all the rambles. There's a lot of members pretty much get the videos that I'm like, I have opinions, but I don't know if they're helpful to the world. So here you go, members. That's what you get if you're a member. And I will be making a Discord server soon, and then you'll have like a private chat within there. So thanks, Chris. Vanessa said I might not be there. My son's 6th birthday is on Friday. Happy birthday. Please don't come on your son's 6th birthday. Just enjoy your son. Happy birthday to him. You can send us your wisdom in the chat later, because I'm sure you have excellent advice on this. The members of the group chats are so good because there's so many people that are so much more grounded, and I'm like a nut like flying off the handle at everything, and there's really nice grounded people there to be like, Liz, you're a little bit much. And Yainer Scott got my monkeypox vaccine today. Yes. I'm glad you were able to get a dose. Those are hard to come by. All right, friends, this is a very Midwest, very appropriate for a Minnesota video, a very Midwest goodbye, where we keep saying, all right, we're going to go. And then we talk for 12 more minutes. Thank you so much for being here. I very much hope that you have a beautiful rest of your evening. I appreciate you spending some of your precious time with me today. Oh, channel members, hang on. I have one job. Second opinion is like, please show. You can join this lovely list of people if you would also like to be a channel member. I know we already talked about that, but we have a list. And if she makes the graphic, she really wants me to show it. So we showed the graphic. Thanks for being here. We're really going to go this time. Do remember, Santa said, can you do a live about nurses eating their young? I'm a nursing student. It feels like it already started. We'll talk about that during the bullying one. So catch us on Thursday, and maybe we'll do a full one day if we have more to talk about it. But do remember, you are more than enough, my dear sweet friends. Even if you do a Minnesota goodbye where you just keep jogging forever, it's a feature of your personality. It's not a problem, I promise. And you, my friends, are not alone, and you can do hard things. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time. Bye.